Good morning. It's Steve here. Um, it's June 17th, 2020. Today we're going to talk about being offended and resentments. Yeah, kind of a heavy topic this morning. But first of all, I want a statement. I heard this morning by a speaker. He said there are no justified resentments. So if you really stop and think about that, I guess what I want to talk about is how many people go around almost looking for reasons to be offended. It can be anything. I mean, it's like, gosh, I was with a guy one time, and he had so much road rage when he was out driving. And if you have road rage, you'll probably understand this. But I mean, everything offended him when he was driving. I mean, he would pull up to a stoplight and start screaming and yelling at the stoplight. Which is when you really stop, when you stand back and really look at that, you're like, this is absolutely ridiculous. This is like what a 2-year-old would do. And he's screaming at the stoplight. Somebody cuts in front of him, and he's yelling and screaming and honking his horn. So looking for reasons to be offended. And so that's what now that's an obvious way that people can get offended, but the less obvious ways are all the little things that go through life. I mean, a tone that somebody might use with you. Offense comes because we get something out of being offended. We get this rush of energy and this adrenaline that comes out of that. And so when we can be offended, and it doesn't have to be anything. I mean, it can be just simply when we were kids. I remember my little sister, when I was a little kid, she would say stuff like, "He's looking at me," and it's like she was getting upset just because I was looking at her. He's touching me. She's touching me. Tell her to leave me alone. Tell him to leave me alone. I mean, it was just nonstop. And again, this is a little bit of a form of being offended. And so I guess it can start when we're little kids. But as adults, it seems to be that we are constantly on the lookout for reasons to be offended. And if you don't think you fall into this category, do really look inside and ask yourself, do I walk around in offense? What is inside your thinking? I mean, are you we work in a business where people call us, and sometimes people call us on the phone and they're real gruff. And I mean, it's like I always tell everybody that works here is don't take it personally. It's probably nothing to do with anything you've done. And even if it has, don't take it personally, because again, there are no justified resentments. There's no justification in being and holding a resentment. And it's interesting. It's not the poison in the snake or it's not the snake bite that kills you. It's the poison. So the snake bite, once you're bit, you can't be unbit. But it's up to us if we let the poison go through our body. So in the Bible, St. Paul was on this ship, and they were taking him across the ocean to go on trial in Rome. And they encountered this horrendous storm, and the ship ended up crashing on these waves. And there were these people that lived in this on this island where the ship crashed, and they get off, and they were really nice people. And anyway, Paul, they put a nice fire up for him so they could all dry off. And here's St. Paul, and he's warming himself by the fire, and this poisonous snake, like a moccasin or something like that. All the native people that lived there knew that if somebody gets bit by this snake, it will kill you usually within half an hour to an hour. And the scripture says that this snake attached to Paul's arm, and I mean it sunk its teeth in there and injected the venom. And Paul simply shook his arm and shook that snake into the fire and just thought nothing of it. And I think the metaphor here, or the teaching is that Yes, he was bit, and the people ended up. It's interesting. So they just sat back and watched. They're like, okay, now Paul's gonna die now, and he didn't show any ill effects of it. And the next day he's still like nothing happened. And so now then they began to think that he was some sort of a god, and they began to worship him. But anyway, the point of the story is that that snake bite, the reason it didn't affect him, and I think that the teaching here is that when the teeth got in there, it injected the venom. He didn't let that venom go through his whole body. And so when you become offended, it doesn't really matter if there's no justified resentments. It doesn't matter what it was once it goes through. So for example, if your spouse walks out on you and leaves you for somebody else, that's a snake bit. You can't be unbit by that. They're gone. But holding on to that resentment, and it's unfair, and that my life, I didn't deserve this, and just feeling sorry for yourself, is letting that poison run through your body. And ultimately, as we know, and like in a rattlesnake, when we have right here in Wyoming, if that poison goes through your body and it goes all the way through, it will kill you. It'll shut down all your major organs, and it'll kill you. In the same way, these resentments and holding on to these past hurts like that will go through your body, and it'll ultimately destroy you. So what's the answer? And part of the answer is just realizing that I hold the key. I don't have to you don't have to live in resentments and anger. I mean, it's interesting. So what do you have in your life? I mean, sometimes you have to say to yourself, what am I getting? Where am I? What do I have? And whatever you have, you can look back on it and say, well, if I'm getting people, mad at me all the time, I think I'm probably because I'm putting out anger all the time. Or am I getting people that are constantly using me? Then I'm using other people. I mean, it's like a mirror. So whatever your life is going, it's like look in the mirror, and most of our problems we're going to find are right in front of us, and they're going to look right back at us. So when you look in that mirror, and that mirror will tell you where what's going on in your life. So if you're having happiness and joy and love, that's what you're putting out. So life's kind of like a boomerang. Whatever we put out is what we're going to get back. So if you hold on to resentments, resentments are going to come back at you. If you do, and not to say that there is something you're getting out of that. Like I said, there's a rush of energy in this flow, and some of us become completely addicted to that. I know people that are addicted to being sick or having something physical wrong with them because of the attention they get. Is a lot. I think a lot of people, that's a lot of it is the attention. They get attention. They get something from remaining sick or being sick, and they don't get that when they're well, and they become addicted to it. So they're always constantly trying to find something. So I mean, they wake up and maybe they slept weird and their shoulder hurts because they slept on their shoulder wrong, and it's like it's terrible, it's the end of the world, and now I need to go to the doctor, and in reality it's just you just need to stretch and do a little exercise and just get on with it, and it would fix it. Now I'm not saying that there isn't things that can go wrong, and there's times when you need to go to a doctor. I mean, if you break a limb and stuff, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that that what we get things out of being sick, we get things out of being offended and resentful. But I have noticed too that a lot of people, I mean, it's almost like they search out for reasons to be offended, and I mean, and so they get offense back. It just comes back to you. So I think the key here is, first of all, deciding what you want. And I mean, it's all you want is attention. Maybe there's some better ways you can get it besides constantly being offended and searching for that. And if you don't like what you have in your life, really look at what, take the possibility that maybe it's because, whatever it is that I have, let's say I don't have any money at all. Well, what are you giving? What are you giving? I mean, are you giving something? Are you giving? Are you just trying to get it, or are you looking at ways that you can give? And again, that's a principle. What we put out does come back to us, and so being offended, it is a choice. And sometimes we go through our lives and we just think, I'm one good excuse is, my family, everybody, my mom's been that way, my mom's mom, my aunts and uncles, everyone is offended. We're all, I come from an offended family. We're all this way. We're all angry people. I come from a long line. I mean, I got 20 grandparents back. We're all angry people. And you don't have to, that's just an excuse. The neat thing about this life is that, man, if you really stop and look in the mirror, you can change almost anything about yourself. I mean, obviously, I was going to say your eye color, but they have things you can change your color of your eyes even. And I'd say your skin, but if I could become darker or lighter, I could. I mean, you can see my hair is kind of a grayish color, white, and I could change that if I want. But I'm talking about stuff on the inside. Stuff on the outside really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter any of that. What's going on the inside is vastly far more important than what's on the outside. And again, I like the iceberg analogy a little bit, because if you've got an iceberg, when you see that above the ocean, that's only maybe 5% of the total mass of the actual iceberg. So what's down on the inside of the ocean is far more important than what's on the outside. And I think that's something that we have too, is that what's going on the inside. So this idea of resentments and offense is things that happen on the inside and inside of our thinking and in our hearts. And when we don't address this, ultimately it can destroy us. I mean, it's interesting. I knew a lady one time, and she was abused as a child, and here she's in her late 50s, and this is a few years ago, and her dad, there's no doubt that there was abuse and neglect into her childhood, but she carried that clear into her adulthood, and she carried these resentments against her dad and her mom as well. And it was bitterness was on her face. I mean, anyone, it's interesting that most people just don't look in the mirror. They don't look at themselves. They don't look at it's written, and this thing is written all over their face. It's like, man, she just oozed in resentment. It wasn't just her face; her whole atmosphere of her body was oozing in resentment. And it's like, I mean, for me, it's like, man, I don't want to be a resentful, offended person. So I definitely don't want to spend a lot of time around these types of people. So, for me, when I was around her, I wanted to limit my exposure to that, because I know that you become like the people that you associate with. And, if there's nothing but offense and resentments, pretty soon I'm going to do that. The old saying, if you hang around a barbershop long enough, eventually you're going to get a haircut. And it's the same saying with this, is like, man, when you hang around resentful and offended people, eventually you're going to become resentful and offended. And so it's just something to think about today. You have a choice. You do not have to live in resentments. And the answer here is forgive. Totally 100% forgive. Forgive that person. In my case, my ex-wife ran off. I totally 100% forgive her, and there's no resentment and there's no offense, and you could say, well, but you don't understand. I had somebody. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I've heard of people that have have murderers that have killed loved ones, family members, and the loved one actually it was just the resentment and the unforgiveness was killing that person. It was like that venom going through their veins, and it was destroying them, and they were so resentful and so and yes, it was wrong, but it being resentful and offended, it didn't help. It didn't and unforgiving didn't help. It just was destroying. It didn't help. It didn't do anything to that person. It was just destroying yourself. And so the answer here is to forgive and to let go, and not let that poison go through your whole body. That's what's going to destroy you. So again, there are no justified resentments. Really let that sink in. Now, I don't want to live my life in resentments, in being offended, and being angry, upset all the time. That's no way to live, and I'm excited that I get to have a choice. My prayer is always, thank you for giving me the free will to understand, to be able to change my own thoughts. And so if you're stuck here, my suggestion is look in the mirror, take an inventory, write it down, write it out. I'm mad at I'm mad at my mother who didn't take care of me, and she drank. She was an alcoholic. And I think when you get to those points, one of the things, it's when you have a loved one who you see as neglect, you really have to go back and look at how they were raised, what was their background, and you begin to understand. And so when someone comes to you and they have some opinion on something, and maybe you think it's wrong or not, always respond with, that's interesting. I never thought of that before. And you can just completely diffuse being offended. So I don't believe it'd be hard to live a joyous, happy life, walking around in resentments and being offended with people all the time. And so if you're finding yourself, things are being offended, you're probably putting that out. We get back what we put out in this life. And so and it's your choice. You get to choose if you want to put out good stuff or bad, and it's up to you. And you will get back what you put out. And if you're getting back what you don't want right now, you have to consider that what do you look at it from the back, go backwards and say, if I'm getting anger and resentments and bullying or whatever it is, what am I putting that out? And if you try, being honest with yourself sometimes is very difficult to do, because it's so much easier just to make excuses. Well, they did this, they did that, and one of the phrases I try to use is, I am responsible. That is such a freeing phrase. I am responsible. I am responsible for my own life. I am responsible. And if you just say that over and over, I am responsible. I am responsible. Anytime an excuse comes up, but but that person, no, I am responsible. I am responsible. I have a part in where I am in my life. I am responsible. Well, God did that. No, I am responsible. And when you get there, I'm telling you, there's so much freedom there, and you can find joy and peace and happiness, and there is no justified resentments. So anyway, I hope this talk is a blessing to you today. I know just talking about it for me reminds me, and I know I'm probably just reminding you of stuff you already know, but put this into action, and have a wonderful day. Give yourself a break. I mean, if you've been in resentments and offended for a long time, you're probably not going to happen overnight. But start now, and you can get there. And pretty soon you'll have a happy, joyous, free, peaceful life. Have a good day.